G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle, and in today's episode of getting started in the Horus Heresy, the Legio Custodes. So, we're going to actually go through this force as a single episode, and we're going to combine parts 1, 2, and 3 together for it. That's because, unlike the Legions, there's a lot less to go through as far as technical details go. The first point I want to start with is Guardian weapons. It's important to understand how these work because every single melee model in the army, which is 90% of the army, is going to have one form of these weapons. The exception being perhaps Heterion Guard or your HQ choices. So all Guardian weapons come with a built-in ranged weapon as well as a melee weapon. Now, the ranged weapons are typically 18 inches in range, with the exception being the Pyrothide Spear, which is your Melter Gun equivalent, which is going to be 6 inches range, Strength 8, AP 1. And Armor Bane, and the Adressite or Ventari weapons. So the Adressite's going to be 12 inches range, Strength 5, AP 3, Instant Death, Armor Bane, Gets Hot. And the Ventari Lance is going to be Strength 7, AP 4, Assault 3, Rending 6+. All the rest of the weapons are basically AP 4 bolt guns. Now, melee. In melee, they're all AP 2. Guardian Spears are going to be fighting at +1 strength, but with Reaping Blow. So they'll get an additional tag if there's more than one model in base contact with your model. And since Custodes are a low model count army, that's going to be the majority of the army. Guardian Axe, on the other hand, is going to be unwieldy. So this one is not going to fight at initiative, but it's going to be fighting at +3 strength. And for those doing the maths at home, that just so happens to be the perfect number for instant killing Space Marines. Funny how that worked out. The Sentinel Warblade is the next weapon of choice, and that's just AP2, user strength melee, but that's one you can combine with the shield, so sword and board. Pyrothite Spear, that's going to be the same as your regular Guardian Spear for melee, so is the Adressite Spear. Now the Paragon Glaive is the exception here because that is your HQ level sort of weapon. And that's a Spear's stat line, but it's going to gain the Murderous Strike on a 5+. And the Ventari Lance is going to be Strength +1, AP 2, Melee 2-handed, same as a Lance. Or Guardian Spear. So those are the important weapons to keep in the back of your mind. Now the other thing we need to look at is their Legio Custodes special rules. So, for a start, they're going to always be loyalist. If, for some reason, you're playing a game where loyalists and traitors, two loyalists face off against each other, you have to declare that one of them is counting as traitors for the purposes of who wins the game in that regard. It's just an actual rule written in here under the Allegiance and Legio Custodes special rule. As for the Warlord is always going to take the Golden Exemplar special rule, which is any combat with at least one friendly model within 12 inches of that Warlord, or a combat that includes him, is going to get +1 to the number of wounds they count as causing for the purposes of winning that assault. Okay? And if that HQ choice is in a combat with a Warlord with that trait, they're going to get +1 to all their attacks and initiative characteristics. So it's going to make them very, very killy in challenges. Another thing to point out is all Custodes are going to come with the Legio Custodes rule. And that's going to grant them specifically a rule called Nemesis. Now, Nemesis units is kind of like a preferred enemy for Custodes. And what it does, it means that you get a +1 attacks when locked in combat with a Nemesis unit. You'll get +1 to all your charge roll distances when charging at them. And when rolling to hit when engaged with a Nemesis unit, you never need to roll better than a 4+ to hit unless the model that you're fighting is in a challenge with you or it's a Primarch that you're fighting, a majority unit type Primarch. That's going to be hard because a lot of Primarchs have bodyguards. Now what the Nemesis unit triggers on is basically everything that would want to fight a Custode. So, Primarchs, Dreadnoughts, Monstrous Creatures, Reinforced Units, Bombard Units, Demons, Corrupted, Super Heavy, Unique Knights. It will trigger if you have a majority weapon skill, ballistic skill, wounds, or initiative of 5 or higher, or the unit includes an enemy warlord. So for all intents and purposes, it's everything. And that's very interesting to see, because you could charge a unit to say More Dathan. More Dathan are a Raven Guard unit, and they have a ballistic skill 5. So they count as an Nemesis unit. You just know that they're really good shots. You just see it, and so you fight harder to charge them, and you get extra attacks for doing so, which is absolutely insanity. So over on the units that you can purchase and what you could build your army around, I've essentially looked at it in 2 ways. There's the nice, polite route, and there's the nastier route. And funny enough, neither one is tied to Games Workshop nor Forge World. They both have their pros and cons. So for plastics wise, if you get this Valerian and Alea model here, this twin set, the Custode in this is perfectly fine to use as a shield captain or a tribune for your Custodes force. That is your HQ choice. If you want to go down the Forge World route, something like this shield captain here is perfectly fine, again, to fulfill either of those roles. When you're going into your troops choices, obviously, you want to be looking at something like this. So this is the shield captain named bundle off Games Workshop, but the box comes with 5 spears, 5 sword and board, Vexilia, or any combination thereof of these units that you want to use. His little dagger that he's holding there in the front as well, that actually has rules this time out. It's a strength user, AP nothing, instant death weapon, because of course it is. So, interesting one that. Now, this unit can be built for either of those choices, basically, spears or sword and board. Sword and board is going to give you the better save. That's probably going to be the one that people gravitate towards more often. But I'm a big fan of the spears overall because I think the swords look horrible. Either way, they're roughly as balanced as one another in the fact that, as far as Custodes go, they have all the regular stat lines of Custodes. So if you want to know what that is, here's your spoilers. 150 points, 3 models, it's 50 points per additional model. Well, actually it's 45, and you can get up to 7 of them. 50's being a bit excessive. Now, those Custodians are going to be movement 8, so they're fast. Weapon skill 5, ballistic skill 5, strength 5, toughness 5, 2 wounds each, initiative 5, 4 attacks each, leadership 9, 2+ save, but only a 6+ invulnerable save. And they all count as coming with melter bombs, even though Games Workshop has never supplied melter bombs in any Custodes kit ever. They wrote it into them, and they shouldn't have. Special rules wise, they are bulky 3, chosen warriors, so every single one can issue and accept challenges. They are also relentless. They are also stubborn. And they count as loyalists for the purpose of rules that use loyalist. They can take a dedicated transport, the Coronis Grav Carrier, but because the unit is so much, like the transport is 3 times the cost of the unit. I would probably advise against it and just rely on using your movement of 8 combined with running and your high initiative to try and cross the board very quickly. That would be my suggestion there. But there you go, now you know what a Custodes unit costs in points. You can very, very quickly fill out your points in this army. Now, going into the Elite's choices, there are 2 options here. Aquilon Terminators, which are the, hey, I want to play with some cool looking models, and they are an Elite's choice, but they're not going to be crazy over the top. They're going to be very strong, yes, because they move 7 inches, their strength toughness is high, their wounds are higher than regular. They have interesting war gear, Solarite Power Gauntlets, for example, on every one of them, very nasty weapon. Or Solarite Power Talons, if you want to go that route. Or you go the Heterion Guard, and you basically lose whatever friends you have. I think I would go the Aquilon personally, in order to retain some sort of semblance of humanity, but, the other option, Heterion Guard, is still there. Just like in Heresy 1, they are all super characters. They have stats that are essentially equivalent to a Space Marine Praetor. Weapon skill is only 5, quote unquote, because again, it doesn't really matter to them. They're never going to need more than the 4+ to hit anything they would have to worry about. They have 3 wounds each, so more than a regular Custode. They've gone up to leadership 10 over regular Custodes. And weapons-wise, they've got just insane war gear. They come with a thing called Meridian Swords, and Meridian Swords are a step up again on the other Custodes weapons, and they all have really weird, funky names that you're going to sit there going, what the hell were they thinking when they named that? But that's just the way some of these things go. I don't know, I think it's quite funny. So, the Meridian Swords have 3 different profiles. The Raptor spreads its wings, the Grasp the Rainbow Serpent, and the Hands cut the clouds. And if those aren't Urban Dictionary slang terms for sexual techniques, nothing is. Now, the Raptor spreads its wings. Strength user AP2, melee 2-handed rampage. So if you march 3 of these guys into a squad of 10 Space Marines or 5 Terminators, you could pull that off. It's going to be very nasty, because you're looking at, if my maths is correct here, 24 attacks? Yeah, 24 attacks at initiative at AP2 at strength 5. So hitting on 3s against most things, hitting on 4s against Legion Elite Terminators, wounding on 3s against most things. Yeah, that's an awful lot of attacks. Then there's Grasp the Rainbow Serpent. You drop all of your attacks except for 1, and it becomes Strength 10 AP1, Measured Strike, and Instant Death. So, very nasty attack. And lastly, the Hands Cut the Clouds, which is Strength +1, so you go up to Strength 6, AP becomes 2, and it's Melee 2-handed Murderous Strike on a 4+. And that one's probably got the most utility, because there's less attacks, but every attack that does get through is just going to instant death. So especially against multi-wound units, that's going to be the go-to. Against a Dreadnought, maybe the Grasp the Rainbow Serpent would be the go, but this is not a unit you need to throw into Dreadnoughts. You have something else for that, and that is another Elite's choice that we're going to talk about, and that's the Contemptor Achilles. So the Contemptor Achilles here is essentially the ultimate in anti-Dreadnought, because it's weapon skill 6, and weapon skill 6 is kind of a big deal in this edition. So weapon skill 5 is already very, very strong, because any unit that's a lower weapon skill than you is going to be hitting you on 5s. Well, you're making other Dreadnoughts hit you on 5s, and on top of that, even if you did run into a Dreadnought that was weapon skill 6, for example, like a Fury of the Ancients HQ, you've already kicked in your special rule, your special ability for Nemesis, because this unit has that rule. So your Contemptor Achilles on the charge is going to be coming in with at least 6 attacks against most things. Now, that Achilles Dread Spear is incredibly strong. This thing has essentially 3 souped-up las cannon shots built in on that las cannon, and it has a very nasty charge, actually. If I pull up the stats on it, the Achilles Dread Spear is... Everything is laid out in a really weird way, by the way, in this book. Okay. Strength 12, AP 2, melee, Exoshock 4+, 2-handed. So, Strength 12, AP 2 with 6 attacks. That's going to instant death anything that's toughness 6 in the game. It's not brutal, no, but it's still very strong. And don't forget, this thing also has your Dreadnought type Power Fists built in as well on his regular hands. So, good for you. You don't have to actually use that spear when you're actually fighting in a challenge, because of course not. And that counts having a Lastrum Stormbolter built in as well. So, very, very nasty unit here. Next thing to look at is your Falcon Pattern Jet Bike. Now, the big thing with these guys is they have an insane lance attack on them. These lances on the charge are just the ultimate in screw you. It's like if you took a White Scars Golden Keshig and you dialed it up to 11, then you're starting to approach what these guys kind of are. So, in short, when you charge in, you're going to benefit from +3 initiative bonus, because it's just this crazy charging weapon. It's a super spear, yada, 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 whatever you want to call it, okay? So, because of that, when you charge, you're going to be striking pretty much before anything else in the game. You're going to be striking an average of initiative 8. On top of the fact that you're going to be striking at initiative 8, you're going to be striking with an incredibly high strength. Why? How high strength are you going to be striking with? Glad you asked. You're going to be going up to somewhere around the vicinity of Strength 10, AB1, and Armor Bang. And you're going to benefit from Charging Bonus, and you're going to benefit from Nemesis against anything Weapon Skill 5 or has a 5 on the stat line, whether it's Toughness, Wounds, Strength, whatever. That's terrifying. See, it's on Golden Keshig, it was like, oh, one of those attacks is nasty. On these guys, you're going to cop 3 of those attacks per guy. And they're a higher weapon skill, and they are fast, and they are strong. These guys are going to be really important in Custodes' army for getting into the action fast to buy time for the rest of your force to cross the battlefield. That is what they're there for, and that's why you include them in the army. Next one along is going to be your Palace Grav attack. So this is kind of like a land speeder. It's a little bit stronger than one when it comes to firepower. And these are going to be very important to you for picking out those units, objects of choice, cracking open, say, Spartans, for example, so you can pull off a charge on the contents inside with your Legio Custodes warriors, rather than them charging you from their vehicle and them getting all the bonuses. Important thing there. This is also the sort of unit that is relatively cheap as far as the army goes, and it lets you get some vehicles and some fast attack into the force. So that's why I really like this particular vehicle. And, of course, Sagittarian Guard. Sagittarian Guard are on the lighter end of the spectrum again. So you have your one-shot disintegrator weapon built in. It's not a bad range either. But you've got your main weapon on there, which is essentially a Legion Heavy Bolter. Souped-up Legion Heavy Bolter, and it's built in on a Custodian. They're not super expensive either as far as like the individual models themselves go. So the Sagittarian Guard squad, it's going to be 175 points, 50 points per additional model. They've still all got melter bombs built in. They've still got all the regular Custodes stats. In close combat, they've still got the Misericord. So it's not like they're unarmed in close combat. They are AP nil, but they still have instant death weapons in close combat. So they can hold their own just fine. And even 3 of them are still going to put out 12 shots, hitting on 2s. It's a lot of attacks, you know. The Adrastus Bolt Caliber is a very strong weapon. In fact, most of the Adrastus type weapons are. So, you know, yay, good for them, I suppose. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how some things have changed, some things have stayed the same with Custodes. These guys were very, okay in the last edition. I think they fill that same niche in this one, where it's like, they're one of the few units you can take as Custodes. People are going to go, that's cool, I don't mind that. Whereas something like a Terion Guard, you take those, backed by Contemptor Achilles, people are going to start feeling very, very angry very quickly, I think. Now, in the Part 3 episodes on the Legions, we covered off on the special characters and the Primarchs. Well, for Custodes, you get to cover off of both at the same time, because apparently Constantine Veldor is now both. He is a Primarch. Now, I have my issues with that from a lore perspective, but let's just take it for what it is on the tabletop in this episode. So for 350 points, you are getting by far the cheapest Primarch. And the reason why is because he is basically one down on strength, toughness, and wounds and attacks from the average Primarch. But, okay, it's a big but here. He is probably better than the average Primarch. So, for a start, he's a Legio Custodes. He also has counterattack, and he has lightning blows, which is every time he rolls a 6 to hit, he gets another hit. Now, 5 attacks doesn't seem like an awful lot at first, but hang on a minute. That's going to go up by +1 because of his Nemesis special rule. So you're going to go up to 6 attacks on him straight away. If you charge, you're going up to 7 attacks. And his Apollonian Spear in close combat has additional special rules. Okay? It's going to be +2 strength. So you're going to be striking at strength 7. It's going to be AP 2. And it's Murderous Strike on a 4+. he is so far removed above someone like Sigismund, for example. Sigismund is just an ultimate, I'm going to kill you in a challenge character. Well, Veldor is... he is going to give Sigismund a real run for his money. He's got Primarch type, so he's immune to instant death. He's going to have the Eternal Warrior. And he's got a 3+ invulnerable save, a 2+ regular save, and anyone that can draw line of sight, by the way, to Veldor gets to use his leadership, which is going to be 10. And keep in mind, the whole army's leadership 9 stubborn anyway. Like, it's really good. Anyone in that combat with Veldor and drawing line of sight is going to really benefit from it. He's got melter bombs built in, so he's perfectly good against vehicles and stuff. But that murderous strike on a 4+ with 7+ attacks is just an insane amount of killing potential there. And for 100 points cheaper than most Primarchs as well. So, yeah, Veldor, in a nutshell, very, very nasty unit. That Apollonian Spear also has a weird bolt gun built into it. Apparently, it's a hypervelocity bolter. So, I don't know, it's half railgun now. String 5, AP 2, Assault 2, Concussive of 1. So, if you throw that into someone before you charge them, you'll drop their weapon skill by 1. Even against someone like Leman Russ. Leman Russ, whose special thing is he's weapon skill 8, so he's a better weapon skill than you. And his armor is a -1 to hit him in the first round of close combat. You still hit him on 4s, not 6s. All the other Primarchs are going to be hitting Leman Russ on 6s. And Veldor's going to hit him on 4s. Will he take down Leman Russ? No, he will die to Leman Russ. But he will do an awful lot of damage to him before he dies. And that is very interesting to know. Because most Primarchs don't even have a 3+ invulnerable save. That's generally like Horus, Ferrus, Vulcan sort of level of Primarch. Most of them are only rocking a 4+ invulnerable save. So he's tankier than a lot of Primarchs. Very interesting to see. Overall, I think the Legio Custodes are a very slow army on the table. They don't have a lot of... I mean, they do have a jump infantry option, but it's one unit in fast attack, and they're very... You either have a taste for them or you don't, whether you want to take them in your army. Whereas, in the average game, I think the things that are really going to make up most of your armies is going to be something like typical HQ, typical squad of, say, Shield Captain, Custodes, Sword and Board, whatever you like. Some form of elite choice, whether it's Wardens, whether it's Aquilon, whether it's Achilles. Some sort of units that are going to get there fast to deal with the enemy, whether it's Gear Falcon jet bikes or the softer Palace Gravitac, and something in heavy support that's not too weird. Things that were really strong in the last edition, like the Contemptor Galatus and the Telamon, are nowhere near as strong in this edition. The Telamon is a lot more tame in this edition, a lot more tame, and I actually think it's so much more tame that they may FAQ it and change it up quite a bit, but we'll see what happens there. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Getting Started in Horus Heresy. This is the Legio Custodes, and over the coming few days, we'll try and also knock out the Sisters of Silence and the Solar Auxilia. Do keep in mind, I want to finish off the Part 3s on the Legions as well, so I'll probably do some of those Part 3s first, if not the remaining 6 Part 3s first, before we go on with the Sisters of Silence and the Solar Auxilia. And that should only take me till Wednesday, so keep that in mind. I've got a lot of editing to do. Thank you all for watching this episode. Please, thoughts and comments below, and I'll see you all on the next one.